and he worked for the National Bank of Poland and the Institute of Economic Sciences of the Polish Academy of Sciences. He has published a series of papers in International Review of Financial Analysis, journals such as European Planning Studies, Emerging Markets, Finance and Trade, Eastern European Economics and Applied Economics Letters, among others. He was a senior editor in the International Journal of Emerging Markets. Today he has a presentation for Poland's economic transition, story of success. And now I leave the stage for Mr. Professor Paweł for his presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paweł. You can start.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. As Lodz mentioned, I work for several institutions where I dealt with macroeconomics, such as the Polish Central Bank, the National Bank of Poland, which this job was associated with the unsuccessful project of adopting the euro in Poland. We finally dropped this plan during the global financial crisis, but we were almost there, so it's like very, very close. The schedule and the decision was pending. So today I'm going to talk about Poland's economic transition. That was Wolfgang's inspired topic, because usually I talk about theory and empirics of monetary integration. But yeah, he convinced me that it would be more interesting for you to do this journey on the economic transition. And this journey will involve both economic history a little bit, but also a little bit of economic theory and applied economics, applied macroeconomics. Because, Poland is usually regarded, how do I switch? Okay, Poland is usually regarded as a story of economic success. But I put a question mark, because there are also some painful lessons and some painful experiences on the way. And also it turns out that just for you, I made a reference to what was going on to Turkey in the meantime. And it appears that Turkey is almost, or more or less, the same economic success story. And that's why I would like your participation in this talk today. So I'm going to give you some questions about macroeconomic policy, but also I would like to get some feedback from you on what was going on in Turkey, especially that sometimes it seems that Turkey is also a story of economic success, and I might not know the point. So, okay, I start with this very biased picture of Warsaw capital. It basically is taken from the same place, but in the between 1989 and 2024, major changes occurred in Warsaw. As I said, the picture is biased because it's overrepresents the progress that was made, but you can find also some pictures which show the opposite, that there was no progress. But then again, this type of pictures would probably be even more biased. So let's start with a picture of where the story begins. The story begins in 1989, but it is important to say a few words about the legacy of the past system, so communism in Poland. And one of these important legacies that we had to cope with was absolutely catastrophic structure of agricultural system. It was really, really outdated, obsolete, lacking capital and very unproductive. We assess the state of the sector with the help of measuring productivity. Yeah, that's typical. If productivity in industry is high, it means that the sector is doing quite well. If it's low, then some problems apparently occur in this sector. But if you have this type of sector, it is even difficult to measure productivity because it is difficult to calculate value added. If you have a subsistence farm, like in Africa or third world countries. Yeah? Simply, you grow some potatoes and then you eat these potatoes with your family, and how to measure value added that you have just produced by growing these potatoes. This was the state of the sector, of agricultural sector in Poland in 1989 when all these changes started. So that's the first structural legacy. Admittedly, this was not false. It was not like the communism was not to be blamed for that, because the roots of this structure was even deeper back in 19th century. Just essentially plants era didn't do anything about it. So in 1989 we had agriculture taken from 19th century. Okay, and that was a big problem. Another problem was state ownership of enterprises and property. So private ownership, private enterprises were generally forbidden. You could not own anything. You could not run private enterprise. Everything was state-owned. And it was typical not just for Poland, but for most centrally planned economies. Private sector accounted for only 8% of non-agricultural... well, okay, can I do it? Touch screen? The private sector accounted for only 8% of non-agricultural employment in 1988. And usually the business was conducted by monolithic state-run enterprises, like they employing for tens of dozens of thousands of people. This is an example from my home city of Lodz, a textile factory that employed 12,000 people in 1980s. I will go back to that because to show you what's like the second life given to this complex of textile industry. So that's the second legacy. And the starting point, so Poland in 1980s looked like this. Well, okay, we can maybe start because I will just be updating those figures about GDP per capita to measure how things develop and how things progress. So in 1989, I'm going to show GDP per capita, but in terms of purchasing power parity. So adjusted for differences in prices. This is a typical correction index to correct for different costs of living and different prices across countries. Yeah. So in 1989, Poland had, this was the number, less than $7,000 per capita in purchasing power parity, which was about 87% of this figure in Romania. So we were much poorer than Romania, much poorer than Bulgaria, yeah, no comparison to Germany, or well, 60% of GDP per capita in Portugal, less than 50% of GDP per capita in Spain. And as I said, I gave Turkey for the purpose of comparison because I'll summarize these findings sometime at the end. So more or less the same level, 108%. So we were slightly richer in terms of GDP per capita at that time compared to Turkey. Okay. So, after World War II, of course, there is always an economic boom after every war. Yeah, that's typical because you have to rebuild your country, and that is exactly what happened also in Poland. But then 50s, 60s, this industrial boom finished. And some first problems occurred. The communist government then opened a little bit just to borrow some money from Western countries and to stimulate another boom. The economy was generally over-industrialized, and that's also typical for those centrally planned economies around Europe. That, well, probably it's easier to compete with the West in how much steel you produce than to compete. It was easier to compete in the production of steel than or coal. Compared to competing in the standard of living, for example. Yeah? That was much more difficult for the Soviet bloc countries. But other sectors were deprived of resources, so no consumption goods, no services. Yeah? So if you wanted to buy anything like a consumption good, you had to stand in the queue for 2 hours, and you didn't basically care what they were selling in the shops. If you saw the queue, the best strategy was to stand in the queue and then learn what they are selling. Sometimes these are buckets, sometimes maybe some machines to make into French fries, sometimes I don't know, tires that you can use for your car. Alright, but so in 1970s, we had a series of loans from Western countries. They were used to sustain industrial boom, and then unfortunately those funds dried out in the 1980s, and another problems began. And then there was a series of partial reforms introduced in 1980s to improve economic situation. But the funny thing about those partial reforms was that, of course, the ideology was we need to keep socialism, but make some corrections. But every time those corrections was a few steps towards capitalism, towards market economy. Okay, they did it. The main idea then was to decentralize decisions in the areas of production, investment, planning, wage setting, etc. But at the same time, there was no market economy. All the enterprises were monopolies. So no need to compete for anything. And then, if you decentralize wage setting, for example, then people come and ask for higher wages. If you are a director of such monopoly, it's like, okay, why not? I mean, people come to you, 1 year ago you said, I cannot because, your wage is being set by the government. Now, these decisions were decentralized. But at the same time, you don't have to compete. You can sell whatever you want. There are shortages all over the country. So, why not? You give wage rises, you raise wages, you raise prices of your products. You don't have to compete, so no problem. Yeah? You don't have to care about financial performance of your company as well. Yeah? Nobody wants profit from you. Yeah? You are a state-run monopoly. Okay, so the result was intensified wage pressure, of course, but no gains in productivity because nobody was interested in raising productivity. That was not any aim of those companies. So if you raise wages, but productivity remains, then of course there is a huge amount of excess demand. People have money, but there are still no products, still shortages. So problems of shortages intensify. If you transfer it on, if you show it on a SAT diagram, then, well, more or less the situation was that there was some price of equilibrium, but price in 1989, the price level in 1989 was lower. And that's why so supply was low, demand was high, and so the shortages, the discrepancy between aggregate demand and aggregate supply meant that you had those queues, right, shortages. And then 1989 came, finally, the the transition starts. How does it start? Well, strikes. All the country is on strike. So the main force behind the transition was the trade union, solidarity. It was the trade union. I think it's the only situation in history that the trade union pushed for liberal reforms rather than increasing social protection. No, they wanted to introduce market economy, and the new government, socialism was abolished, the opposition took over, and those people who came from the solidarity with the trade union were harsh liberals who imposed market reforms and did it in a very violent way. Okay, the first decision was to free market forces. So, if you do such thing, if you say, okay, we don't want administrative prices, we don't want to push prices to be at an uncompetitive level. Let's make prices adjust and tell us something about aggregate supply and demand. This is the only way. If you want to move from centrally planned economy to market economy, you need to give the price, give prices its role of clearing the market. That's what market economy is, right? Supply, demand, and the price clears the market. So they did it. And of course, prices started to adjust towards its equilibrium level. But that was not the end. That was just the beginning. We are still in an economy which is dominated by those monopoly enterprises, right? Several months earlier, we had fully centrally planned economy. So we still have those directors. We still have very, very easy situations from the point of view of producers. Everything you produced was immediately sold in the market. In the economy of shortages, it was very easy to supply anything, and people would buy anything. So if prices increase, people are angry, they want higher wages. And people are also, they feel powerful because this is the solidarity movement, the trade union, which is now ruling the country. So we need to, people were feeling strong. And they were pushing for their wages to increase in accordance with growing prices. So not only prices the prices were increasing, but aggregate demand as a result of higher wages was increasing as well. More and more and more. So every increase in prices induced wage pressure and so on and so on and so on. So the result was hyperinflation. Annual inflation increased to 600% between 1988 and 1990. So this is how market economy said hello to Polish society. This is how it introduced to itself. Yeah? First lesson, hyperinflation. And the situation was really, really dangerous because every month the inflation rate was growing from 200 to 300, 400, 500, 600. It reached, on a monthly basis, I think it reached 900% at some point. So, something had to be done to solve the problem of hyperinflation. The question, my first question for you is, I treat it as a case study. Maybe, how the economy was organized. What was the structure of it? So, yeah. What would you do if you were governing the economy like this, and if you witnessed inflation to grow, to skyrocket, and to speed up so fast, what would you do? What would happen?
I could suppress the demand, maybe. Demand.
Yeah. How would you do it?
Maybe stabilize some of the wages. You said that people would like to have their wages to rise, but if you don't raise it, so people basically do not have the money to spend, so inflation will eventually downwards.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Of course, if you go back to this picture, well, basically there are two ways. Either you make aggregate demand curve stop moving, so that prices finally can achieve equilibrium, or you can push aggregate supply curve to the right. The problem with aggregate supply curve is that it doesn't move so fast. It takes time. Now, everything you do to what can you do to make aggregate supply turn shift to the right? You have to improve efficiency. You have to reduce costs of production, maybe, right? Introduce new technologies, but that takes time, and there was no time in this situation. So you're right to think about aggregate demand curve as the one that need to be focused on. So the first action was to curb wage indexation. So suddenly, wage could have only been indexed by a fraction of inflation, like 0.2, very, very low. And if any enterprise increased wages by more than the allowed indexation index, it was subject to a penalty tax, which was 500% of the increase in salary. Okay, that raised some motivation of enterprises to refrain. The second, C, consumption, was to be affected as in the first stage. Construction and fiscal policy, so withdrawing public subsidies, investment spending. So we go down with C, we go down with G, and also drastically raising central bank, you know it, as we talked today during the lunch, raising the central bank interest rates. Everything that could have been done with aggregate demand, if you think about the ISM model, then everything which involves the IS curve and the LM curve was done. Well, as I said, I don't focus on the supply curve because it takes time. But of course, it was started. I mean, the shifting AS curve was also started. Was it successful? Incredibly successful. So by 1991, inflation rate was already less than 100%, and then further deteriorated. Full success. The man in charge was the Prime Minister Bartolowicz, who had also some advisors from the US, Jeffrey Sachs, for example. But nothing comes without a price. Social costs were extremely high. This is the second lesson, and the second hello from market economy to Polish society. The unemployment before 1990, so until 1989, the unemployment rate in Poland was 0. It was forbidden. Unemployment was forbidden. It was the responsibility of the state to find you a job, to give you a job. You had to go, all you had to do is to just attend your job. But enterprises started going bankrupt. Also, people on social assistance, we have another line here, increased from up to 3 7% of total population. Right? Unemployment rate increased from 0 in 1989 to more than 16% in just 4 years. Overall, we could say that this was a very, very painful period. To the extent that those liberal forces which overthrew the communists in 1989 were lost elections, and people chose those communists again. They put them in office in 1993 because just the pain was, the shock, the transition shock was so big for them. Okay, so the beginning was not very promising. Of course, we did improve our situation against Romania and Bulgaria, but to be honest, nobody in Poland compares its country against Romania and Bulgaria. We were always looking at Spain, Portugal, or Germany. And that was our reference point. How many years are we going to wait to achieve standard of living in Portugal, Spain, or Germany? And the change in GDP per capita, just so from now on, it's going to be always relative GDP per capita. So it decreased from 37 to 31% compared to Germany, from 61 to 48% compared to Portugal, from 49 to 43 compared to Spain, and, well, with respect to Turkey, this collapse was most pronounced. So we only improved against Romania and Bulgaria, which were going even more, even bigger problems at that time. But let's move on. Fortunately, those reforms were not neglected and unwinded in subsequent years. So the phase 2 was privatization and liberalization. That was very, very surprising. Between 1990 and 1994, more than 800,000 new private enterprises were created. In a society which didn't know anything about running businesses, because for the previous 45 years they were living under communism. So they didn't know how market economy operates. They didn't know how to, run business, do the accountancy, nothing like this. And in a miraculous way, somehow 800,000 those private enterprises were created. And it was in line with the declining number of state-owned companies. And that was the third painful lesson of a market economy: inequality. Because at that time, in the early 1990s, it was still the economy of shortages. So still it was very, very easy to sell things. For example, many people were coming to Turkey. They were buying jeans, and then just to sell them in the streets of Polish cities. Fortunes were created like this. Millionaires were made with these Turkish jeans. But also in other countries, it's similar patterns, but with different items. So we speed up a little bit. By 2004, private sector, which was non-existent before 1989, accounted for 98% of output in retail trade, 97% in construction, 81% in industry, and 70% in transportation. So the shock in these terms was really, really huge. So privatization and liberalization, if you think about economic theory, is simply accumulation of wealth. Is simply boils down to accumulation of capital. Yeah, so probably are familiar with the Solo model. So we were simply raising investment rate and accumulating capital, using the fact and using the property of diminishing returns to capital. Fortunately, we had Germany and other Western European countries close by, and capital was abundant in these countries. It was very scarce in Poland, so marginal product was very low. It was like you could have made a lot of gains if you just transferred this capital in the form of factories, for example, yes, in Poland. I think it's skipped again. Yeah. So if capital is low, if capital to labor ratio is low, then it's easy to rely on capital accumulation as a strategy to raise labor productivity. Yeah? To some point, that is a very easy strategy. So FDI, so foreign direct investments, net inflows increased throughout the next years from 1990s. But unfortunately, and that was another lesson from market economy, efficiency gains have their price as well. So after this transition shock, we finally struggled, we got out of it. But privatization and liberalization meant that this, you had to sort things right in terms of running a business. So if a foreign capital was bought formerly a state-owned company, which was just employing thousands of people, and it turned out that 60 or 70% of the staff was actually hidden unemployment. Yeah, so we could get rid of it, get rid of them without losing even one unit of output. And that was quite common. So unemployment rate started to increase again. And it exceeded 20% in early 2000s. That's my traumatic experience from the labor market, because that was the period when I graduated in 2002. And the headline unemployment rate was 20%, but the unemployment rate among graduates was 45% at that time. So you basically had to know someone, or if you didn't have your father who was running a business, so that you can work for them, work for him, or if you didn't have any uncle in some institution, you had no chance to get a job. So most of my classmates from university, from studies, they went abroad to Germany or to the UK. Or to, Warsaw. Warsaw was the only country which more or less absorbed those graduates. And that was, of course, had its impact on public finance. If you have so many unemployed people, then automatic stabilizers, unemployment benefits that you have to pay, it becomes a burden for public finance. So at some point, the government simply stopped on social spending. And another wave of poverty, so to say, was the outcome. But overall, this period was actually pretty successful. Despite this huge unemployment, those efficiency gains dominated. Yeah? And if you look at this, until 2003, the change in relative GDP per capita was plus 24 against Romania. So now we are at 125% of the GDP per capita. 147% of the Bulgarian GDP. Some progress with respect to Germany, plus 13 percentage points. from 29 to 42 against Portugal, 10 against Spain, and also against Turkey. So, but we were back to more or less 1989 figure in 2003 against Turkey. Yeah. And then the next phase was the integration. That was like, well, the European Union was a dream for everyone at some point. I was an Erasmus student in 2000 in Thessaloniki in Greece. And I came to Greece and I was like, I couldn't say anything. It was so rich. Greece seemed to me such a rich country. And I was like, I came from the poor Eastern Europe. And I saw everywhere billboards from with those stars, European stars. So every construction, every renovation was subsidized or sponsored by the European Union. So I said, oh, that would be really great. And we entered. We entered in 2004, and it was great. It was great. The thing is that we basically cared about getting all those funds. Yeah, I mean, now we can be clear about it. But I don't know. Our politicians use big words about solidarity and even bigger words on the motives of joining the European Union, but. Common people were hoping to get those funds. Those funds did contribute between 0.3 to 0.5 percentage points of GDP growth between 2003 and 2009. That was nice. I mean, that's a big effect. According to a recent estimate, these are the estimates I received last week, actually. So, very fresh. But all the other effects, free trade, movement of capital, movement of people, yeah? No quotas, no tariffs, those effects contributed between 1.6-1 percentage point annually. So if you add it all up, in 2022, instead of 79% of GDP per capita of the EU average, we would only have 60%. So that was beyond expectations. Okay, so those first years of integration against the EU, well, we lost a bit against Romania and Bulgaria, which were back on track again. But nobody knows, I think, in Poland, because, as I said, nobody cares. But with respect to Germany, another 5 points earned, even more so with respect to Portugal. So now 74% of Portugal reach this Western European country, and 9 percentage points against Spain, and we also added 5 against Turkey. And then the good time lasts and are extended over the next years. But what I would like to focus on are the resilience episodes. Resilience to the 2 huge shocks that occurred also in your lifetime, your conscious lifetime. Yeah? So the first one is the global crisis of 2008, and the second one is the COVID. So against the global crisis of 2008, between 2008 and 2010, we earned another substantial part with respect to, well, Germany, +4, Portugal, +6, Spain, +7, and Turkey, also 7. Okay, a small disclaimer. That was the time when we almost adopted the euro. So in 2008 here, we were in talks, because I was involved in that, so we were in talks with the European Central Bank and the European Commission. We were almost there, and people thought we would get there. Politicians were all, they all agreed, both the Central Bank and the government. So we were all on track. We produced a report on costs and benefits of adopting the euro in Poland. That was the biggest research project in the history of Poland as a whole, with the help of some notable researchers like Eichengreen, for example, Danny Rodrik, but also most of the economists in Poland. But we didn't. In 2008, we collapsed, the crisis emerged, and suddenly the Eurozone was started to shake in its foundations. And we also weathered the crisis very, very well, as you see. And mostly, of course, resilience is a very complex phenomenon, but I would put depreciation of the nominal exchange rate of our currency as a top performer. It sheltered us against the effects of this crisis. It prevented domestic demand from falling apart. We know it because Slovakia was just one step ahead of us, and they did introduce the euro I think in the beginning of 2009. Yeah. So here they introduced the euro. We were almost in the ERM2, but not yet. So they didn't have their Slovak crown. They didn't have their exchange rate to shelter them from the crisis. They fell apart for some time, while we used it to remain more or less unaffected. Yeah, maybe we can go back to the euro if you are interested in this process. And the second part, how to extend the time? Okay. So should I continue until about 5:30?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, so just I'm going to finish this slide and we can have a break. And the second part, the second piece of resilience is to the COVID pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. Here, starting, I said, public aid, because, the amount, the size of economic support to enterprises, I'm not sure how it was in Turkey, but it was highest among all the EU member states. So at that time, in 2019, we already had our, now former government, of right-wing government, which was also, conservative, but very social, generous in terms of social policy and supporting and using expansionary fiscal policy. And they did use it. 86% of all enterprises in the country received help as from the COVID fund. But there was one condition. You cannot fire any people. So you have to keep your employment. This was something which sheltered domestic demand. Yeah? Because you can, if there is a crisis, you can do both. You can basically do two ways. Either protect domestic demand by any means, or protect competitiveness. Yeah? Let enterprises fire and then keep output per employee. If you keep a high competitiveness. But if you are a big country, relatively big country, then it is the domestic demand which matters most. If you're a small country, it's probably competitive. Yeah? We also had a track of policy effects related to the global crisis of 2008. And two quite similar countries in the European Union, Spain and Germany, followed a different strategy. Germany sheltered domestic demand. They introduced Kurzarbeit schemes, but no firing, just reducing the time of work. And Spain was on the competitiveness side. Spain did much, much worse. And we knew the effects. So we also said we protect domestic demand. Another 4 and 8 and 10 percentage points earned against Germany, Portugal, and Spain, respectively. But see, Turkey, we lost 7. This is the only country. So my question for you is, what did you do if we did so much and apparently you did even more? Or maybe you have some other miracle cure for COVID pandemic, for a big shock, or a big shock that as that one. Or so my question first is: are you aware, and do you agree that that was a success? And if so, what was the source of it? Yeah.
Actually, I personally think the most basic reason of this is that the Turkey is actually announced the first case of the coronavirus far more late than every other countries in Europe. So the trade is not affected because our Minister of Healthcare were saying that there are no COVID cases, so companies could maintain their jobs or something else. But I personally think that it was a huge lie. So maybe that was
lie and luck.
Yeah, I saw.
So you didn't impose any restriction measures on trade, and you didn't close businesses, hotels, restaurants. Is that true?
After the announcement
for much shorter period.
After the announcement of first case, we actually do some things to that you said. But I saw interesting statistics that shows that in the first days of coronavirus, the first months, Turkey was the only country that economically growth in Europe. All the other countries have degraded. You understand me? Yeah. But the Turkey was the only country that risen because in that time, Turkey was the only country that hasn't announced the first case. So there was no ill people in Turkey. So, as I said, I think that it's a huge lie. I think that was not true, basically.
Okay, yeah, but it paid off. Maybe if that's the only reason, then maybe it paid off. Okay, shall we have a break? Okay, so how long break? Shall I 5 minutes? For a little bit shorter, and then if you have any questions, maybe I will have some answers. So, going back, as you see, a very important situation occurred in 2021. We finally caught up with Portugal, which was one of the poorest rich countries from our perspective. A Western country, but the easiest to catch up with. So we made it in 2020. I think Greece was a little bit earlier. So we caught up with Greece maybe a few years earlier. But I didn't put Greece because I don't want to. Greece was really having a hard time since 2008, and catching up against Greece was very, very easy. Not even for every economy because of all the problems they had to go through. Okay, so now I think, well, a bit about the future. Now I hear that you are also familiar with the concept of the middle income trap. This has been also a widely debated issue in Poland since about 2008, whether we are in the middle income trap or not, or whether middle income trap even exists. Because it's not so obvious, and there are some papers, there are some researchers that claim that middle income trap is actually a made-up phenomenon. So, okay, how would you define the middle income trap? What's the middle income trap? How do you understand it?
Orta gelir tuzağı soruyor.
What? How do you understand middle income trap? Okay, yeah.
Basically, the personal income has just stuck in a certain point and just couldn't rise up.
Yeah, why?
I don't know the reason.
Why? Well, again, I like to use simple models for that, to explain complex things. But if you think about,
There's a Pawel rule there.
what?
Pawel rule in function. If you talk mathematically, there's a Pawel
Yeah. I think it's. You see mathematical. Well, it is, but I think it's just graphical. It's just coincidence. So the idea is that if you think about a solo model, right? You have capital to labor ratio and labor productivity, and you have break-even investments. You have the labor productivity function and saving rate. And if your saving or investment rate is very low, you have a really scarce capital. So you have like K1, capital. Your labor productivity associated with this capital to labor ratio is Y1. Then it's very easy to accumulate capital, like we did in 1990s, I showed you. So you either raise saving rate. If you raise saving rate, then you can receive a substantial increase in labor productivity, and labor productivity determines wages and standard of living. Or you don't even have to increase your saving. The solo model is widely criticized for its it doesn't account for it treats countries as isolated islands. But in reality, there are many countries close to each other. So if you integrate, then you don't have to increase your saving rate. You can simply import savings from abroad, and that's how you can increase your capital to labor ratio and raise labor productivity. That's okay. So to some point, that is a good strategy. But if your saving rate is really, really high, and like for example, if you are already at K2, of course this is absurdly high saving rate if you look at it, but it's just for the purpose of illustrative purpose. Well, if you still want to raise saving rate to increase capital labor ratio even more, then the outcome in terms of labor productivity will be very, very low. So you can push for higher savings. You can accumulate more capital. You can increase K, but the improvements in labor productivity will be really low. So if you are Poland in 1989 and your capital to labor ratio is K1, then it's okay to go to K2 and consume all these gains. But if you are Switzerland, yeah, and you already have huge amounts of capital, then accumulating even more capital as a strategy of stimulating growth is very unproductive. Is very ineffective. It is much better if you are at K2 to invest in new technology, because technology, what does technology do? Technology raises labor production, productivity function. Yeah? So you can stay at K2, but you can simply increase technology. Yeah? And that's how, with the same K2, you can achieve more output. So the well, of course, sorry for maybe it's becoming unclear, but if you get the idea, that's basically what the middle income trap is. The middle income trap is the failure to shift your growth strategy from raising K to increasing A. Yeah? Theoretically, this is very appealing because it is a completely different way of thinking about your economy. Yeah? I mean, you can attract new investment based on your cheap labor, like we did for decades in Poland. Attract, I mean, Volkswagen factory. If you shift it from Germany to Poland, you get much lower cost of labor, you have more capital, and that's how you stimulate growth. It's easy to rely on cheap labor. But if you drain out these resources, if you want to if you want to come closer to Germany, yeah, then you have to behave like them, yeah, because, well, at some point Germany will consider it also a very unproductive strategy to shift factories to a country which has, well, 70 or 80% of its GDP per capita. So you need to think differently. And, for example, attracting improving your technology is is different. It's much more difficult, but it's also different. And you have to think about it differently. Yeah. For example, to attract. Go back to Volkswagen. To attract a factory, it's much easier than to attract a research or design center of Volkswagen. Yeah, because factory you can put everywhere. You have cheap labor, you can go and put it into a jungle, you can put it, everywhere. Well, you need some roads, so that parts get delivered and stuff. But you cannot take a research or design center of Volkswagen and put it in a jungle. Yeah? Because, as Krugman said, these type of activities are not subject to diminishing returns. They are subject to increasing returns. So it's much more profitable for Volkswagen if they had €1 billion to invest in existing research center that they already have than to establish a new one in Mongolia, for example. What to do? So how should we change this engine of growth from capital intensive to technology intensive? What do you think should be done? That's difficult. I think many economists think about it.
We have to shift the curve.
What?
Shift the curve. We have to shift the curve.
Shift it. I mean, shift it up.
Yes, shape. We need to change the shape. Radically change the shape of the person.
Okay, but how to do it, like policy.
Yes, we are running for policies for this. Maybe infrastructure. Change for infrastructure. Anything else from class?
Yeah, maybe.
Hani ne diyorduk? Şöyle structural solutions. Structural.
Yeah.
Since we have to increase the technology level, maybe we can actually increase the level of education in our country. Because if we want to increase our education level, we need to first increase our educated people. So
Okay, yeah, so yeah, education probably works. I think there is some question, big question, whether technology is pushed forward by average education level or education level of top educated people, like stars.
Yeah.
Like if you think about Silicon Valley, which creates technology for half of the US. They are doing this not because of average education level, but because they collect some prodigies. Prodigies. Maybe, but that's an open research question, I would say. Yeah. So people think about it.
Know-how production maybe fitted in this process, push the technology.
Yeah.
And South Korea and another Asian tigers suited.
Yes. Yeah, and that's also a good example because obviously in South Korea, they did it. They bravely. If the middle income trap exists, they killed it. So yeah, this is an open question, of course, because you can approach it from a different perspective and you can have different ideas. I'm also one easy policy trick that you can do here, probably, maybe, is when the economy is in good shape and when when there's already a lot of capital and the business sector is robust, but you see that they cannot proceed, you can raise minimum wage. You can push minimum wage up because that forces enterprises to change, like to substitute, to replace labor with some more technologically advanced solutions. Yeah, of course, this is forced, but we do something like this in Poland. I'm not sure if somebody thought about this while raising minimum wage. But right now, we have been raising minimum wage, not for this reason. I have to emphasize, not for this reason. I think nobody thought about it. But we have been raising the minimum wage for a few years now, and we can see that some of the activities which were based on labor cost advantage, they fire people, but at the same time the economy keeps growing and maybe accelerates right? Because labor simply, enterprises start thinking in a different way. Labor becomes too expensive. They start to replace labor with technology. They start to create some solutions that replace expensive labor. And as is usually the case, it doesn't mean higher employment rate. Actually, maybe I will skip that slide. So where do we stand? This is again something that often asked for some recent trends and economic situation. So one of the diagrams that I usually, when I hear current situation, this is the type of a diagram that I usually did in the central bank. So all various decompositions of growth from the point of view of demand or supply or labor market. So this is how it looks like in Poland against the EU. What is important important is that, well, maybe you can tell me what is important. So what you have here is consumption, is the orange bar. Yeah? Gray is investments. Not sure if it's visible. G, government spending is pale blue. Exports is yellow, and imports is dark blue. So Poland is growing on exports and consumption. Yeah? Which means that even despite of raising labor costs, yeah? Like here, the minimum wage, well, the minimum wage, I think 10 years ago might have been 400 euros per month. Now it's 1,000 euros. So the minimum wage, the minimum monthly salary in Poland is 1,000 euro. So very good. So it's increased really solidly. You have a question?
Yeah. Actually, I noticed that unlike the EU, the consumption has just shrinked in 2023, and I just wonder why. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will go to that.
In EU as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. I will come to that. But most of the export is very robust. Yeah. So apparently, enterprises, they somehow remain attractive. I mean, keep their product attractive, so that export is very, very robustly pulling GDP growth up. Imports pulls it down, but it is normal when there is very high domestic demand. When you earn more and more and more, you import more, and that drags GDP growth. So, well, the downward negative blue bar, the imports, is usually associated with strong consumption. That means strong domestic demand. Yeah, we were complaining about the investments, the role of investments, and that's true. Sometimes, especially here and here, private investments were neutral. They didn't contribute. So we are suffering from low private investment rate. That's probably our biggest problem. Your question about 2023. 2023 is the war. The Russian attack Ukraine,
Obviously.
and we are closer to Ukraine than the EU as a general, right? So that's why also the most volatile component of private investment was scared away. Yeah? So that's the reason. And in 2020 we have a COVID shock. Yeah? And again, we benefit. So see, exports suffers generally in the European Union because most of the new member states have the euro. But we again benefit from the flexible exchange rate so that it absorbs the effect of the COVID shock. So that's well the output from the GDP, the demand composition. When it comes to inflation, yeah, everything was okay for recent years, but in 2019 something bad started to happen again, and well, the central bank blamed the COVID and then the war. Maybe, but if you exclude the energy, food and tobacco, so this is core inflation, so something which should be under influence of the central bank, it's still is too high, much too high, and well, the discrepancy between EU and Poland is even more visible. So, while the COVID shock, admittedly, well, it could have been important because Poland didn't suffer so much. So the demand was still strong, and the inflation was like more was higher because of that. But later on, when Russia attacked Ukraine, even after excluding all those effects, like energy prices, for example, many people blame the central bank for inadequate reaction, too late, too weak, and that also reminds us about the role of independence of the central bank from the government. The central bank used to be independent in that period. Now that the friend of the ruling party became the governor, and he didn't really conduct the monetary policy as it should conduct. So that's summary with respect to inflation. What we have full success, I would say, is the labor market. Remember I told you about those unemployment rate episodes of 16 or 20%. We used to see unemployment rate in Poland as one of the biggest in the entire European Union. And now it is the lowest in 2023, together with Czechia. Yeah. So it is another shock. This time it's positive, but it's a big shock for Poland to have such a low unemployment rate. Again, despite very sharp increases in minimum wage. Yeah? So perhaps if you are struggling with the middle income trap, then forcing a little bit is not bad. Yeah? With now raising labor costs a bit and improving standard of living at the same time. There was a big concern about when this former right-wing government introduced very generous child allowances for women who were for families. So whenever the child is born, you get monthly allowance and now it's 150 euro per month. So for one child. So if you have two, no, it's actually it's 200 euros, sorry, 200 euros per child. So people thought that women simply would quit their jobs just to stay with the child and enjoy the maternity leave. But women, which were typically less active than in EU, in 2016, these child allowances were introduced, and the participation rate and employment rate, okay, these are employment rates, so good heading. So employment rate of women kept increasing and exceeded that of women in the EU, and the same performance. So what I mean is those generous allowances did not harm employment. They don't want to stay at home. They still want to work. So that they get the allowance doesn't matter, regardless of whether they stay or work. Okay, so that's a brief flash of the most important threads, and that's the summary. So the entire period. So again, this is GDP per capita of Poland relative to Romania. It was 88% in 1989. Now it's 140%. Yeah, so we were poor, now we're richer. 26 percentage point increase in this. Bulgaria from 76 to 136%. 60 percentage point increase. Germany, 37 to 73% of its GDP per capita. Yeah, so 36 percentage point increase. Portugal from 61 to 104%, so as I said, Norwegian and Portugal, and Spain from 49 to 94, so probably 2 or 3 years more, and close the gap against Spain as well. Turkey, almost no change. So that's why that was, I think, the biggest puzzle when I started preparing this, when I prepared this data, that as we converged towards EU, especially those rich countries of the European Union, Turkey did the same. So in terms of per capita GDP, adjusted for purchasing power standards. So we have this adjustment. Turkey is more, well, quite similar to like, I mean, there was no advance. There was only 3 percentage point increase over that period, over that entire period between 1989 and 2024. That's why I would be interested in learning because, well, whenever I go, I say, okay, Poland's story of success in terms of economic reforms. But it appears that Turkey should create its own story of success, right? And explain it to the world. Because it's more or less the same as Poland's. Okay, I told you about this old textile factory. This is how it looks like right now. It's transformed into, well, the biggest shopping mall in Poland, with some restaurants and bars and people. There's a beach in the summer with beach volleyball. So many of those old factories right now are transformed into shopping malls. This is my daughter's favorite place in the city. Or apartment lofts, very trendy apartments, restaurants, things like that. Okay. It's 10 after 6. Thank you very much. So, yes, I promised the questions and answers session, but so you can either ask questions or give me answers of the reasons behind Turkish success story. It's up to you.
Actually, I just want to make something else. You see, Professor Paweł also has an experience as a central banking system.
Yeah. Yes, in adopting, well, I was there was a special task force unit for adopting the euro, and we were.
So we were talking about the integration of euro, so your currency, local currency, and can you just briefly give an account of this story for us?
Okay.
They are still using their local currency. They are not using.
Yes, but because we just we were preparing to enter the eurozone. Yes, we saw it as a house of stability, and suddenly, when the door was open, this house of stability was on fire. So we just escaped from it. But yes, we did. There was a massive economic research behind the report on the euro in Poland, and concentrated on various aspects. But as I said, I told Wolfgang, well, the benefits of the euro are quite straightforward. These are relate from less transaction costs, no risk in terms of volatility of when you make contracts, so you don't have to hedge the transactions when you trade with eurozone countries. There's also increased credibility because we import credibility from the European Central Bank. We had some rough estimates of how this will impact positively on Polish GDP. The biggest problem was with it's always this kind of steps is the react to what happens in Poland. Yeah? So there's the risk of having so-called asymmetric shocks. Asymmetric shocks. Yeah? There could be especially demand shocks, which the monetary policy is capable of fighting, because supply shocks, of course, it is not the subject for monetary policy. The thing is, if the country is structurally similar to the entire monetary union, then there is low risk of asymmetric shocks. If the structure is structurally different in various ways, these risks emerge. Right? So, for example, we have a lot of coal mining. If there is a negative demand shock in the coal mining industry, it will affect all coal mining, but it is concentrated in Poland, so we will have problems. But the Eurozone will not. What will the European Central Bank do? Will it help Poland? No. We need lower interest rate. We need expansionary monetary policy. But can the European Central Bank help us? It will destabilize the entire Eurozone. It would have to destabilize the entire Eurozone to help one country. It's not going to happen.
Yes, that's the problem.
So there was a lot of research on the structural similarity and also synchronization of business cycles. Yeah? Because one thing is, and also about the natural rate of interest. That's another thing. Yeah? Some countries, especially catching up countries, tend to have higher natural rate of interest. And you can enter the Eurozone as a catching up country, you can have structurally two expansionary monetary policy. Greece is 50%. That's a good example. Greece entered the Eurozone and money was simply too cheap for them. Interest rates were too low. What was the effect? Over borrowing, both from the private sector and the public sector. So, because of low interest rate, households could have take more credits, the public sector could increase public debt, and because it was cheap. But unfortunately, that has its consequences, right? Inflation goes up in that country. You don't have any means of correcting real exchange rate, which is nominal exchange rate multiplied by ratio of prices. So if nominal exchange rate is fixed because you are in the Eurozone and your price increases, then your real exchange rate keeps growing. You lose competitiveness, and there is no way of correct except for internal devaluation. So you have to reduce prices again. You don't have Polish zloty, which will do the job for you. You have to reduce prices. How to reduce prices? You have to reduce costs. You have to reduce wages. That's why Greece went on fire in 2008, because they had to increase competitiveness back, and they had to accept lower wages. So that was, of course, the issue of research. It turned out at that time that we would not have such big problems as Greece, for example. But of course now it has to be repeated, right? There were some structural differences.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, you can also ask.
Yeah, actually, my question is about the first minutes of the lesson.
The first minute?
Yeah, minutes. You have showed a picture of a couple of people farming, and you have mentioned the bad agricultural structure of the country in 1988, and a page later you said that the Soviet politics is just not the thing that you can blame. It's just the result of the politics in the 19th century, and just one page later you showed us a statistic. It's about only 80% of jobs was non-agricultural in 1988. So it was like 40 years later after the Soviet politics. But then in 2023, like 40 years later in liberal politics, this data is completely reversed, and the 80% agricultural. So, but you said that
you see this private sector accounting for only 8% of
Yeah.
all agriculture.
non-agricultural. So it's bad. It's only about agriculture, right?
Yeah, so we don't count agriculture here. That's what I want to say. That if you take industry and
Yes.
services, then 8% of industry and services, the unemployment in industry and services was private, and the other, the 92% was national, state-owned. Yeah, that's probably the
So okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, okay, probably you are not used to, thinking about state ownership. Yes. What I mean here is that if you forget about agriculture, and only 8% employment was private. The rest was state-owned companies. In agriculture, it was much more because, but is it employment? Again, if you grow potatoes and then eat them, do you have a job?
No.
I don't know. It's like it's a job. I mean, it's a job. Yeah, it's subsistence. We call it subsistence farming. Okay. Any other questions or answer to my question about success? Yeah.
How do relations affect on the Polish economy because of the Ukrainian and Russian war?
What?
How immigrants affect on Polish economy because of the Russian and Ukrainian war?
That was a good question. They helped us. Ukraine, well, the impact was huge. That's for sure. We used to have some Ukrainians before the war. But then about, to give you the scale, about 2 million refugees came to Poland, which is about 60% of total population. So that's how much the population increased in 1 or 2 months. That's 6%. So most of, my colleagues, for example, had some some encounters and hosted some refugees. I hosted a refugee woman with a daughter in my home, at my apartment, and gave her a room for some time, and then I arranged job and school for the child. These were first. These were women, so they entered, of course, some cleaning services and factory jobs at the beginning, right? Then some men also came to construction fields, but actually that was a good time because we had labor shortages in these sectors. Like, for example, it was very difficult to hire a cleaning lady, and many people wanted some help. So it's quite popular among middle class to have a cleaning lady coming every week, for example, and it's just pay. But also the construction sector. Also, we had some labor shortages. So they assimilate very, very well. No problem. They are very workative. They work a lot. No problems with them. No major problems. So we are afraid that they will go back. So we don't want them to go we want them to stay. So that's why we try to make them feel as good as possible, make them stay. I don't know if there are some estimates in terms of, probably there are, but I don't have. I keep looking in my head about the estimates of what they brought to Polish economy. I can't find it, but the general reception is that we are very thankful that they were very good for our economy. We could actually get some more, no problem. As you saw our unemployment rate, 2.8%. is natural unemployment rate, so it's very easy to get a job.
Professor, is your country on the brink of war economy? Can you say something like this? War economy?
No, not well.
Our adjacent to this area, region.
What?
Near to this region.
Yeah, we have a very large border with Ukraine, so it's. But we are. I wouldn't say that we are on a
War economy.
No. We are. I think we are far away. Well, we spend a lot of money on military equipment. A lot of money. We just bought 500 Patriot shuttles or something, and hundreds of tanks and planes and stuff. By and amounts of military equipment, just like defensive.
Are there chances to spread the war?
Yes.
The region?
Yes, if Russia decides to attack NATO, and NATO is one. So,
Yes, you have some contingency plans for this.
Contingency plans?
You have some alternative plans?
I don't know. Just we keep preparing together with NATO and alone and construct our shields. Yeah, we want to get like an iron shield like Israel. So we try to, but it's all only protective. So we just do some protection against attack from Russia. But well, not in the next year or two, I would say, but it is possible. People think it's possible.
Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much.